and it was another arrow in their quiver.
And so City Council adopted a resolution that an injunction be sought, right?
Correct.
And this was on February 10.
That's right.
So you were able to call a meeting that quickly to get everybody together from the 9th when you kind of conceived this to the 10th. Is
That's
that right?
right.
And it seems like the police was on board with the injunction. They thought it would be, it wouldn't hurt in any event.
Wouldn't hurt.
And so ultimately, as you say, the injunction became effective at 7 p.m. on February 11, is my understanding. Is that right?
That's correct.
And why was the city an intervener in that application and not the main applicant? Do you know?
I think through our discussions before we proceeded, we talked about who was most impacted, and how could we tell the story here about who was impacted. And it was clear in the first 60 minutes of Huron Church Road being blocked, our phone rang at the mayor's office from our largest employer, Chrysler, or now Stellantis, to say what's going on at the Ambassador Bridge. There are 5,000 people directly who work in that facility making Chrysler Pacificas and minivans that rely on smooth and efficient border crossings because the whole industry, the whole auto industry works on a just-in-time basis. There's no parts being stored on site. They are brought in and that bridge is moving and the material is moving across that bridge every hour of every day. And so it's for perspective, the average part that goes into a car that rolls off the assembly line at the end of the manufacturing process, those parts have crossed the border on average 6 to 7 times, back and forth, Detroit, back to Windsor, as they continue to be, upgraded and built. And so within the first 60 minutes, they called and said, what's going on at the Ambassador Bridge? And so we knew that the APMA, the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association, the CVMA, the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, were impacted dramatically by the activity at the bridge. And so they were certainly, good parties to put forward the request. And then we took the role, we played the role that we played, I think, appropriately.
And so my understanding is the Attorney General of Ontario was also an intervener in that application.
That's correct.
And how did they become involved and what was the coordination with them like?
I'm not sure.
Okay, who took the lead on the injunction from the city's side?
Shelby Askenhager, who's our Commissioner of Legal Services.
Okay.
City system to be able to move around and live their daily lives. The University of Windsor. The University of Windsor is directly adjacent to Huron Church, directly adjacent to the Ambassador Bridge. The primary route that people in the city of Windsor would use to get to the University of Windsor is Huron Church Road. So 17,500 students that attend the University of Windsor. You have a high school that was actually in the protest zone, Assumption High School. It's been there for probably 100 years. And so that school was directly impacted by the protest activity. And I mean, those are several, but the impact was material during the protest and then even after the protest because of the deployment of the Jersey barriers along Huron Church Road had a direct impact to the hotels, the motels, the businesses, the small businesses, large businesses, grocery stores, you name it. They were impacted, including the high school, including the University of Windsor, because everyone had to find another way around.
And you had mentioned that the cost to the city was over $5 million.
And the second point was to tell the constituents that they're misinformed when they think that the police are not doing anything, correct?
Mm-hmm, that's correct.
And it's important for the city to be supporting the police, and because sometimes the public doesn't see what the police is doing and why they are doing or not doing, taking certain enforcement actions. Is that your understanding?
That's true.
And another useful lesson you indicated you learned from Ottawa was not to publicly announce the number of officers requested. And I believe, as I understand it, had Ottawa not happened first, you might not have realized that. Is that fair?
Well, I think that may have come out very quickly to the extent that it was mentioned to a member of the media. The course was corrected very quickly thereafter.
Superintendent Dana Early, who oversees their emergency response team.
And he says in this email, as discussed, you can continue to liaise with our Essex Detachment Command team.
Yes.
Should intel be received or action by demonstrators taken to shut down the bridge, don't hesitate to reach out. So,
Yes. That original discussion with the Essex Detachment Command team was more of an information sharing session at that point, and they were going to monitor the 401 for us, but exactly what the intention there was to continue discussing with them.
okay. And at this point, I guess what I'm trying to understand, even on the 4th, there is a threat of a blockade on the 7th, and the response is at the local OPP detachment level, nothing that kind of was escalated above that from a resource perspective.
That's correct. I would call those like informal requests.
Okay. And I think you mentioned earlier that there were 35 officers dispatched as part of that.
Approximately, yes.
And those would have all,
And have recommendations moving forward.
That's correct.
And if we can go at page 27, please. On the right table, it's point 4. It says under CIC takeaways, CIC understand is critical incident command. We see at point 4, needed WPS to be more engaged with collaborating on operational plans. WPS members have best idea of the area and implications of decisions and should be embedded in decision-making matrix.
So this document there's a lot of opinion in this document. The way it was prepared, the superintendent that was in charge of this document of preparing it essentially sent out opinion papers to all our subject matter experts within our service. And this, I don't know where that came from. It didn't come from me, but certainly that was just part of a recommendation that somebody felt that, was legitimate.
A reference that says that currently officers are being outnumbered and surrounded by protesters when confronted or approached. Is that an accurate description?
Absolutely. I watched it myself on open source YouTube channels.
And you mentioned that you were trying to continue the regular Windsor policing at that time,
It's correct.
because regular city life involves all sorts of things that sometimes require police assistance.
Yes, we have a very busy police service, yes.
And would you think it would be fair to say that every city in the province of Ontario would involve that type of requirements for their police services?
Absolutely.
And they were also being stretched thin?
Yes.
And you mentioned that this would happen essentially across the country, would it not?
It's my opinion, yes, for sure.
And so, turning lastly to the resurgence, you've mentioned that you were quite concerned, or the Windsor Police Force were quite concerned, as was the mayor, that they could return, the protesters could return.
That's correct.
And in fact, Interim Chief Belair submitted an affidavit in support of the Windsor City motion to extend the injunction indefinitely. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I won't pull it up, but Interim Chief Belair swore an affidavit, which is found at WPS 6049, and in particular at paragraphs 44 to 54. He states that based on, and I'm paraphrasing, but based on monitoring of social media, demonstrators are asking more locals to join, more vehicles are traveling to the area, social media indicating further action from protesters expected, quote, it's not over, quote, regroup, quote, we are not done, quote, slow roll is next, and finally, quote, civil wartime. Anti-police comments are also observed, and the February 15th convoy of several transport trucks from Ottawa en route to Windsor was intercepted by police.
That's correct.
Folks, if you want to be kept up to date on what's happening at the Emergency Act Inquiry, including my live tweets and some clips and highlights that occurring at the Emergency Act Inquiry, by heading over to revolutionnews.ca/Emergency Act Commission. That's revolutionnews.ca/Emergency Act Commission. And of course, here folks, while you're there, please head over to donorbox.org/emergency act commission. That's donorbox.org/emergency act commission. And of course, here folks, if you could chip in a buck or two, that will be greatly appreciated, as it will help me cover my travel expenses, including my expenses on food, as bringing you these stories doesn't come for free. Thank you so much.